Instagram in a second. Right now, I'm going to go to the video. All right, my beautiful people, welcome back. I want to welcome back Coreyprince. Corey, do us a big favor and give us a quick update of what's been going on since I had you last on the podcast.
Well, we've survived Hurricane Helene. We don't think of hurricanes really affecting the mountains very often, but
hold on one second. I think we got. Go ahead.
So we got in 3 days we got 30 inches of rain, which for us is a lot. Which caused some major flooding pretty much everywhere. The craziest thing I saw was, I think they said something like 800,000 trees or something like that were knocked over, and I would say 95% of those, it was just like the root ball and everything. Like the trees just fell over from, there's so much, the ground was just so wet. So
yeah, it's it's interesting because here in South Florida we're used to hurricanes. I know you guys are not used to hurricane. And then I text you, I believe right after the hurricane. But I was also talking to a couple of friends of mine in North Carolina. There are like I mentioned before, I had Benjamin from Smithmore Castle on. I was texting him. And it's funny because no one, including myself, but right as the storm was going up there, because it had already passed already passed Florida. It went to Georgia. As you know, I have some properties in Georgia. Those got affected. But I'm texting back and forth. And I don't remember if I actually texted you before or after the storm, but I know I definitely was talking to Benjamin and a couple of other people, Bridget from Spruce Pine. And during this, they're like, oh yeah, it's just raining, but it's a lot of rain. I'm thinking to myself, you guys will be fine. You're in the mountains. The flooding will happen someplace down. So
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. We knew there was a storm coming in. We knew we were getting a lot of rain, but the hurricanes that hit you as even a category 4, by the time they get to us, it's like a tropical storm and it's no big deal,
right.
Which is what Helene was too. But it just, the mountains just funneled all that water into all the rivers, and it was just crazy. I live 20 minutes outside of, probably 30 minutes from Chimney Rock, North Carolina. It's gone.
Wow.
You can't, they just finished building like a 1-lane road to get down to it again. And you have to show your ID proving that you live down there to get down that road.
Oh, that's crazy. So let's backtrack. I want you to walk us through that, your thought process. So, as you mentioned, and like I said, I was texting a bunch of people in North Carolina, and they're like, we're getting rain, like no big deal, but we're getting, we're getting rain. And then for those that are not familiar with hurricanes, and what you should be afraid of, it's not the winds, it's really the water. Like, for example, if you're on the coastline, the storm surges that come in is what's really becomes dangerous. And then the flooding, which is what ended up happening in North Carolina. It's really, again, a lot of people always talk about the actual winds themselves, but the winds are typically, especially in North Carolina, by the time they get up there, they're not that strong. But it was the amount of water that came down into North Carolina in a very short amount of time. So Corey, walk us through it. So you guys were notified. You guys knew the storm was coming. Did you? I know you didn't anticipate it being as bad as it did, but did you have anything in place, related to the storm that you activated, or that now you wish you did?
So just, we had, in the 2 or 3 days leading up to Helene getting here, we had 10 inches of rain.
Wow.
And then Helene brought another 20 plus,
Wow.
So, I was like, it's just going to be rain. I sent all my guests like a canned email saying, weather advisory, please be careful. If anything were to happen, reach out to 911 and, stuff like that. But I didn't think I was going to have to do much more than that, and Friday morning, when Helene was finally gone, I woke up and I looked out and I had like 2 trees down in my yard. I was like, we're good. I knew it, and then it finally stopped raining about noon or so. And I was like, we should have gone to the grocery store. We might be, it might be bad. So I got in my truck and I tried to drive to the grocery store, which is about 5-minute drive away from my house. And I couldn't get more than a quarter mile in any direction. There were so many trees down.
Wow.
And I had no idea, looking at my house and my neighbors' houses, you couldn't tell, but it was like a war zone once you got out on the road. Like, a property right around the corner from me, who I actually manage. It's like it used to be a hotel that was converted into condos. I managed properties in there. Like, it has a big lake, and they didn't release the dam in time, and the water came over the dam and washed about 50 feet of roadway out. You couldn't even get to luckily there was a back way to get in, but the main entrance was gone.
Holy smokes, brother.
And that's like a 2-minute walk from my house, So
now, Corey, let me ask you this. So you said you sent out an email, but first of all, let's recap. How many properties do you manage in North Carolina?
So short term we have 56, and long term we have 110.
Okay, so you're dealing with long-term tenants as well. Yeah, I forgot that you also do long-term. Okay, so let's talk about now just the short-term tenants, short-term rental. So what was your occupancy rate at the time right before the storm?
So September is one of our slower months. So we weren't like super high. We were maybe at like 50% or so occupied at the time. A lot of people left early, just because they weren't 100% sure what the storm was going to do. And then, within 24 hours, I think I had like 70 cancellations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, maybe not 24 hours, but within the next couple of days, it was just like, when we had like cell service even went out up here. So, which was the craziest thing. So like for the first like day or so, we had cell service, and then the cell service went out for like 2 days. So when the cell service came back on, my phone just went crazy with all the notifications. Yeah, it was like we had so many cancellations. Like my Stripe account timed out multiple times because it couldn't handle all the refund requests I was sending.
Oh, right as the storm is coming down. So how many guests were you hosting that stayed and tried to ride out the storm?
Luckily, not too many. Maybe 15 or 20 at the most.
Okay. That's good. But I mean, still 15 guests you have to deal with. So
yeah.
So like, walk me through did you have a policy related to like a hurricane, tropical storm, etc.?
Not really, because they're really not a major issue up here.
Right.
Like up until the day of the storm, when people were trying to cancel or doing anything, I was like, it's past your cancellation period. I'll let you have a credit towards a future stay. So I had about 10 of those, and then Airbnb and VRBO stepped in and just said everybody's getting a refund that wants to cancel. So
yeah. It falls under the natural disaster clause. So
yeah.
Now, again, now hindsight being 2020, going forward, can you and before we even go into other stuff, but now that with hindsight, what would you have done different now that you have the hindsight of knowing, hey, this thing was really, really bad?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight being 2020, we definitely should have been more prepared. Like we had no idea. Like the city of Asheville still doesn't have water.
Right.
6 weeks later. Like we should have had water and stuff like that on hand, and maybe encourage people to cancel instead of waiting for them to request to cancel. But again, I mean, this is such a crazy storm. I mean, the chances of this happening again are so slim. I mean, like it's like 1,000-year storm up here, So
it's funny because when I spoke to Benjamin over at Smithmore Castle, he was fortunate in the sense that because just like you guys, September is really not that busy, and he had blocked off the week right before the storm, like I think 3 or 4 days before the storm, he had blocked it off because it wasn't busy. He had blocked it off, and he had invited his family, his parents, to come over because he's originally from California, and they just had a baby. So they, his family hasn't seen the baby, so they shut down the castle, and the family came over a couple of days before the storm. So he's thankful that happened because Spruce Pines got destroyed. Like they had no power, no water, no cell service. All the roads were washed off. Are you familiar with Smithmore Castle or no?
I'm not. No. I mean, I've heard of Spruce Pine, but I don't know that I've ever been there, to be honest.
Okay, so it's way up in the mountains, right?
Yeah, it's closer to Boone, isn't it?
Huh?
It's closer to Boone, right?
I'm not that familiar with North Carolina, so
yeah,
I don't
think
know
it's like northeast of me.
Yes, yeah, it is. It is. It's it's right on the trail, the trail, the Appalachian Trail there. So he's right up there. So, but again, I'm texting him, and then a friend of mine named Bridget, she's right down, like maybe less than a mile from him, and I'm texting her, and she's like, "Oh man, it's raining a lot," and I'm like, "Oh, you guys will be fine. You're in the mountains. Don't worry about it."
That was my thought exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of rain, but it's just rain. Like
it's crazy.
I figured the normal places that flood would flood, but I just did. I now realize the destructive power of water. You know, like
Yeah.
I had never experienced anything to this extent, you know?
Well, luckily, now, from our perspective, luckily for us, we have, unfortunately, we have had a lot of experience with flooding and with hurricanes. So we have a lot of protocols in place. So, like, for example, um, the moment we get an advisory, a tropical storm or hurricane advisory, we do what you did. We send out the communications, right? Hey, this is what's going on. And then once that advisory goes into a watch, right? Then we encourage everyone to leave. Right? If they're currently here, we tell them, hey, we don't advise you to stay. I highly recommend you leave. And then we tell them we're going to credit you any unused days. You'll get that credit. So that's in our protocol. But the moment we get a warning, then we step it up even further, because now we have to prepare the properties. So in our policy is once that warning comes into effect, then our team goes out and they start removing furniture, putting everything inside, securing everything to make sure it doesn't become a projectile with the winds. And with our guests, we actually have them sign a waiver saying, if they decide to stay, because we're not going to force them to leave, but we actually have them sign a liability waiver saying that they're staying at their own risk, because we know that we're going to lose power, we may lose water, and we haven't had it so bad that we lose cell service like you guys did, because I know in Spruce Pine they didn't have cell phone service, water, or electricity for at least 10 days before they even got a chance to make a phone call. So anyway, those processes for us are in place, but that's why I asked you, with hindsight being 2020 now, what steps are you going to take? Are you going to do different? Are you going to implement something similar that we do with a watch, a warning, etc.? What's your plans going forward with that?
We haven't really got to that point yet where we've decided this is how we're going to handle it in the future. I don't think we would have to have a policy quite as robust as you have, just because
You're not. It's not as common.
Yeah, we're definitely never going to have a hurricane warning here. We'll have a watch or something like that, but it's never going to be 100-mile-an-hour winds by the time it gets up here.
Yeah, correct.
So I mean, we will definitely have something better than what we had, but I don't know. We still haven't figured that out, and it definitely won't be as in detailed as yours is.
So now let's talk about after the storm. You said you went out, you couldn't get to the store. So walk me through your thought process there.
I was freaking out a little bit, just because I couldn't, I had no idea what was going on, because I literally had no communication with the outside world, outside of how far I could get in my car, which was a quarter of a mile, mile at the most. So I was really nervous. And, the cell service for the first day or so, cell service worked, but it wasn't great. Like I could answer phone calls and I could get on social media and stuff like that and see what was going on. And I have 8 properties on Lake Lure, and all the news coming out of Lake Lure was that they evacuated everybody downstream because the dam was going to fail. Like,
wow.
There was so much water in Lake Lure that they thought the dam was going to break. And so I was like freaking out. There was nothing I could really do, but I also, I didn't know for sure if anything had happened, and, like I said, and then after about the first, like all day Friday, we had cell service, and then we woke up Saturday morning and we didn't even have cell service. And I don't think it came back on until late Monday, and we didn't have power for like 10 days or something like that. We didn't have internet for about 2.5 weeks. But Yeah, it was just like I was freaking out because I couldn't talk to anybody and I had no idea what was going on. Luckily, I mean, we got so fortunate as far as our properties go. I mean, including the long-term rentals, we only had 5 properties with real damage. You know, we had trees
Wow.
down in yards and stuff like that, but we have one house on Lake Lure that is basically a boathouse. You know, it's right over the water, and that one had about 10 feet of water in it. The lake had rose up so high. But none of our other properties on Lake Lure, other than boat docks and stuff like that, had any damage. We have one house that a tree fell on like the corner of it, which wasn't horrible. You know, it didn't do a ton of damage, but it's still out of commission being fixed. And then we have another house, one of our nicest houses. It's on the very top of a mountain. And there was a mudslide in front of the house. Like everything in front of the house just like slid down the mountain. How the house is still there, I'm not sure. But there's no damage to the house, but the footers for the deck in the front are questionable. So we're until we can get engineers out there, we're not gonna rent that house anymore. But the road getting to that house is gone. Like owners got up there, had to go 4-wheel drive through like some random person's yard to get to the
Wow.
house. Yeah.
Wow. So not having, okay, so you know, you wake up that morning, you don't have cell service, you don't have internet, and you really can't go far. So at what point walk me through the process? How do you try to contact the 15 guests that you did have, the long-term tenants that you did have? You know, how did you get a hold of them? You know, walk me through that process.
So, like I said, the first day or so, we had the service was going in and out. So we immediately started messaging everybody. So we were able to find out by Monday or Tuesday. We knew about every house and whether they had damage or not. Just from doing that, you know, like granted, some of the messages we didn't get for like a day and a half, 2 days, but you know, by Monday, I was out driving around. I had been to most of the houses in Nashville on Monday. By Wednesday, I had been to all the houses except for Lake Lure. Lake Lure was really hard to get to because a lot of the roads washed out. So finally, I think by Thursday or Friday of that next week, I was able to finally get down to Lake Lure. I mean, they would like stop you. The police were stopping people to make sure they weren't just sightseers. Like I had to tell them why I was going down there. So yeah, I would say within a week, I knew exactly all the houses and which ones had any damage. So it took me a lot longer than I'd liked. Like I was like freaking out. There were some houses I just knew were just gone because they're in the middle of the woods and you know, they're surrounded by trees, and like I just couldn't believe the ones that had damage compared to the ones that didn't, you know?
Wow. Wow. So all right, cool. And then were the property owners trying to get a hold of you, and did you get a hold of them beforehand, or how did you work that out with the property owners?
I mean, all the property owners, you know, we all notified them, you know, hey, yeah, there's going to be a storm. But again, we didn't think it was, you know, we weren't, you know, like nobody knew that it was going to be what it was, you know, so it wasn't like, but yeah, like I said, but as soon as I went and saw a house, I would call the owner if I had cell service and let him know, hey, you're good. Or, hey, you know, the one house with the tree on it, we actually knew about that because the neighbor is friends with the owner and told the neighbor. So we found out that we knew that house had a tree on it before we actually were able to get to it. And then same thing with like we have this amazing house on Lake Lure that was like, you know, multi-million-dollar, seats like 15 people. The guy who owned, there are 2 guys that own it. They finished building it in May. I mean, it's like brand new.
Wow.
And one of the partners has a construction company, and he brought his crew up there and cut down trees to get to the house. So I knew about that one Friday night, before
Good.
cell service. He said it took him he lives in Charlotte, And he said it took them what should be an hour and a half drive, took them about 3 hours to get there. They were like cutting down trees that were blocking the road to get to his house. But there was no damage to the house. The boat dock got flooded. But the part that was flooded is where they store their boat. They don't let guests use that part anyways. So, nothing bad happened to that house.
Okay, so what, like right now, what's the status right now? Are you guys fully operational? You still have some properties that you can't get to? What's the status?
So all except for the house on the top of the mountain that there was the mudslide, and the house that had the tree on it, all of our other houses are fully operational.
Fully operational. Okay.
Oh, and the one in Lake Tour that flooded, that one. So we have three houses that are still offline.
Oh, that's good. You've only 3, right?
Yeah.
I mean, here it wasn't even a hurricane when we got that major flooding in Fort Lauderdale, and that one I had 4 houses not operational.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, I almost feel bad how good we fared during the storm.
Yeah, you guys did very well because, like I said, I've been speaking to a lot of people in North Carolina. Even my properties in Georgia, there's like, we just finished the cleanup in my vineyard. When I say just yesterday, they just finished, and we didn't clear out any of the down trees that were in the wooded area. So we have over 40 something acres on that property. I think closer to 50. Anyways, 40 something acres of that property that's cleared, but then we have another 30 acres that's not clear. We didn't even touch that. We just cleared out what's in within the cleared areas, because a lot of trees fell forward. I mean, we had one of our barns blew away. Our greenhouse blew away. Half the gazebo and one of them blew away, but the actual main house and areas, that's still good. But like I said, we just finished clearing that out, doing the repairs we needed to do. And I know there's a lot of people in the higher mountains of North Carolina, like I've been mentioning, Spruce Pine, they're still nowhere near to being up and running, with the exception of Smithmore Castle. One of the reasons I brought Benjamin on was because I follow him on Instagram, and then he had mentioned that they were going to be opening their doors to guests on November 1st. And I was like, whoa, this guy's got to tell me what he's been doing. And they've been working 24/7, nonstop, just to clear roadways and get the property back to normal to start receiving guests. And he mentioned about when is your peak season. So tell us financial, from a financial standpoint, when is your slow season? When is your peak season? Because I know that in North Carolina, you guys are going through your peak season, correct?
Yeah. So typically October is about a 30% margin of the biggest month of the year. Like, it's about 30% bigger than any other month of the year.
Wow.
So just because of all the leaves, like everybody wants to come up here and see the leaves changing. It's very pretty. Don't give me, so, but yeah, so typically October is like crazy. And then November and December are okay. Definitely around the holidays, it's crazy, but the rest of the month are just so. And then once you get into the wintertime, it dies off pretty quickly, and then starts building back up, April, May, and then by June, it's like full bore again. And then there's a little lull in September before the leaf watchers get here. So that's kind of, we have probably 7 good months out of the year. Luckily, the other, 5 aren't all in a row.
Yeah. That's so, and it's interesting because, and I learned that from Benjamin at Smithmore Castle. He was telling me the exact same thing you just told me. For us and a lot of my other properties Europe and in South America, September, October are usually, we call them the shoulder season because they're really slow. But you guys have the opposite of the fact. You guys are up, like October is like your big month. So I found that to be very interesting. And so this, if you can put a number on it, right? I'm not sure if you already did the analytics in October. What kind of losses do you think you experienced as a result of the storm?
So I do know, we lost about, so what would be normally like a $90,000 to $100,000 month, we made just under $20,000 in October.
Wow, it's a big loss. Wow.
So yeah, it's about an 80% loss.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that sucks. But listen,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's good that you guys didn't, with only having 2 or 3 houses non-operational, that's a very big plus. It's a very big blessing. Because the rest you can recover. But let me before we leave this topic on the hurricane itself and go into a couple of other things, what lessons did you learned as a result of this disaster?
So definitely we need a better disaster plan for sure. Another thing that I think we should have transitioned our properties to midterm rentals faster. Like the one thing, like November is going to actually be a really good month for us because most of our properties now have midterm renters in it. So like displaced people are now renting our places for 3 or 4 months at a time. So we're actually probably going to have the best winter we've ever had, in all honesty, because normally the winter is really slow. But having transitioned to that mentality faster would have been beneficial,
Yeah, and interesting point. It's a very good point you just brought up. And I know it because I do it, but I never talk about it enough. So for those that are watching, this is extremely important to understand. If you're, like, for example, here in Florida, I mentioned we get hurricanes all the time. So, and I mentioned this already in one of my other podcasts. Displaced people, right? There's always, for example, for us, these past couple of hurricanes all have hit the west coast of Florida. So what I do when I see that the storms are coming to Florida, specifically the west coast, I specifically target those people. Now, unlike other people, instead of raising my prices, I actually reduce them and give discounts that for people that are looking to relocate and stay temporarily while the storm passes. And if their property got damaged, then we can work out a midterm deal for these people. And Airbnb, as much as I bash them because I'm not a big fan, a lot of the stuff that they do, one of the things that I do like about them is that they're very proactive in that sense. So, I mean, even you guys up in North Carolina, we get letters or emails from Airbnb asking us to house displaced people from North Carolina, from Georgia, from Central Florida. They're all affected to come stay in our properties. And I'm part of their what's referred to as their open door. I mean, their open house program, in which we'll take on displaced people, and oftentimes, if it's a short period of time, we'll let them stay for free on some of our properties. And like I said, then we can switch over to the midterm. But it's a good, what you just mentioned is really, really important, right? Because it's also part of our hurricane preparedness plan. So if we have, like I mentioned, if we know of a hurricane that's coming, if it's not going to affect my area, man, my marketing team immediately jumps on that and starts reaching out and advertising through Facebook ads that target specific areas, letting them know, hey, we're not going to be affected. So if you need a place, come stay in ours. We're reducing our prices. Normally we reduce them by 40%. Come stay here. And if you do become affected by the hurricane, then we will extend that. It does two things. Number one, I firmly believe that we should always give back, right? Especially when things are going well. And anytime a hurricane misses South Florida, for me, it's a blessing. So I want to give back to people that are going to get affected by that. But from a long-term marketing perspective, giving up a night or two and letting people stay here on our properties for free or discounting it, I don't feel like I'm losing out, because I feel it gives me an opportunity to put a guest in my ecosystem. As I mentioned before, one of the things that separates us from a lot of other short-term rental management companies or even short-term rental operators is our emphasis and focus on retargeting our past guests. I have been very successful in that. That's one of the reasons that during the pandemic, especially from a short-term rental perspective, when they shut down for that month, it's one of the reasons why I was able to weather that storm and actually increase my business, because I didn't need Airbnb. I didn't need Verbal, because those shut down. But because I have an email, a client base in which I am constantly marketing to, I was able to target these people, especially people from New York at that time. If you remember the pandemic, like New York was a complete shutdown. You couldn't do anything there. So we shifted and targeted to them and said, hey, come to the free state of Florida and come stay in our properties. And I didn't need Airbnb. I didn't need Verbal, because I have a direct booking site and I have my own customer base. So it's a great, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to let, especially those short-term rental operators out there, that be prepared, be ready, take care of your properties, do all that stuff. But if you're not directly affected by that, you can help those that are, and help yourself by marketing your business. You want to add to that, Corey?
Yeah, no, like I said, I just wish we would have. It's not that we didn't think about it sooner. We just didn't implement it fast enough,
Yeah. And listen, no one's going to blame you for not thinking about it sooner. You had a lot on your plate. And that's another thing I want to address. And this is why I think it's and this is those that follow the channel, I'm always harping on creating processes and procedures, right? Because when shit hits the fan, if it's not something you're accustomed to, man, you got so many things on your mind. A lot of things should be automated, right? It should be like you need to activate certain things. But if it's not something that's written, right? It's not a policy that you have, man, you're going to miss it, because there's just too many things going on. And it's hard to go back. But if you have it in place, for example, for us, because we're used to this, when we have what's called a hurricane preparedness plan, and marketing is part of that. So as soon as something like that happens, man, it's automatic. So it's not something that we have to think about. So always, of those that are watching, just remember that. Always try to plan for the worst. Even though chances may be small, but if you have it in place and there's a policy that you don't have to start trying to implement on the fly, it's always much better.
Yeah, we definitely found some holes in our system that we're gonna over the wintertime, when we're reevaluating for the next 2025 season, we're gonna come up with some SOPs to make sure that doesn't happen again.
And I want to. That's what I want. That's a good segue to where I want to go to now. Okay.
Yeah.
We in the short-term rental industry are very, very, are extremely dependent on certain tools, right? We need our phones, we need the internet in order for us to communicate and do all that stuff, right? Now, what steps going forward are you going to implement, keeping that aspect in mind? What do you think you can add to your toolbox. So if this happens again, you're ready for it.
It's really hard because, like you said, that 2 days that I couldn't use my phone, I couldn't do anything. So, like I would really like, and at first I was like, well, I'll just, instead of having cable internet, I'll have like, Verizon internet or T-Mobile internet, but it wouldn't have worked either,
No.
So like, I think, the only other option would be, Starlink or something like that. But I can't justify buying Starlink for, a once in a lifetime, event. So I don't know the right way to address that part of it, because it's just so crazy to think that could happen again, But just our response times needed to be faster. Having a way of communicating needed to be better. Like, because we didn't have I knew my people were doing the things they needed to do. I just didn't know when they were done necessarily. So I wasn't 100% sure if, which houses had been looked at and which hadn't. And when we didn't have communication, I felt like there was maybe some overlap. So we need to have better ways of making sure that everybody knows exactly where to go.
Yeah, good. I'm gonna give you some suggestions.
Okay.
Now you mentioned one of them. I'm a big fan of Starlink. We've had Starlink, and even before Starlink was in place, we had HughesNet, which is another satellite internet business service, right? I'm a big fan of having satellite internet. So, although it is a cost, for us, I still think it's a viable option. Now, for you, like you said, it may not necessarily be a viable option because of the cost, but I would, especially in some of your properties that are in the mountain that already have sketchy internet to begin with, I would replace what you currently have. And I wouldn't, as a short-term rental operator, I may not necessarily incur the cost myself. I would try to convince a owner that has one of these properties in the mountains, because there's plenty in North Carolina, convince them to get a satellite internet so that if this ever happens again, you can switch base to that particular property. And then at least be able to make some phone calls, connect to the internet to see what's going on, and at least communicate, right? That's number one. The other thing related to that is, and I'm not sure, I know we kind of discussed this last time, but I don't know if you currently have it. Do you have in your operations or part of your staff virtual assistants?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would rely heavily on, once something like this is going to happen, is put them on notice. Hey, if you can't get a hold of me, it's like Star Trek, right? You have the con, right? You're in command. You are in command. You need to send out all the notifications, block off our properties so we don't get any bookings, and let them take control. Obviously, making sure that they're following your orders, making sure that you have some stuff in place that they can utilize to do that. But at least your business stays operational, because you got kind of lucky, because you were only out of, you had spotty service and you were only out of internet for a short period of time. But my folks at Smithmore Castle, they were out almost a month without electricity, without cell phone service, and without internet. And if it wasn't for their satellite dish, because they did have Starlink, man, they would have been out of touch. So I recommend those two things. Work with your virtual assistants, or if you're not going to have a virtual assistant, the next thing I recommend, especially those out there that are listening and you're running a short-term rental operation, if you come out with this is why it's important to network with other short-term rental operators that are either in your sphere, maybe not necessarily in your region, but someone that you could reach out to and at least have them start taking control of some of your operations temporarily. Extremely important, because I firmly believe that this is a wake-up call for North Carolina, but other parts of the country have already woken up to this. Other parts of the world. I don't know if you're following what's happening in Spain, but my friends over in Valencia just a couple of weeks ago experienced some major flooding, right? Took out an entire town. And they're currently right now, they're without power, they're without water, and they're without internet. So same thing with them. I don't think this is going to be a one-off. I think with time, we're going to start to see a little bit more of this stuff, especially if we don't, because more and more we become very reliant on technology, right? As time goes on, we're gonna be more dependent on it. But when the shit hits the fan, the technology will fail us. You know, Benjamin also gave me a story, very interesting story, and I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a tangent here related to technology, right? He luckily for them in Smithmore Castle, they're considered preppers. They're self-sustained, but they do that on purpose, and they did it on purpose from the beginning, because as a castle, they're on 100 acres up in Spruce Pines, and they want to always be self-sufficient, right? Because they want to have that back in centuries ago, how people actually lived, and the whole story of being in a castle, right? So they follow that protocol. So they're preppers. So they have generators in place. So they were really prepared for something like this to happen. They just they never experienced it. So even though they had food stored, they really didn't do it for the magnitude, for the length of time that it has taken for them to recover. So that's one of the things that they're taking steps on, is instead of prepping for 3 or 4 days, they're prepping for a month, right? But the other thing, the story he gave me, which was very interesting, is that he was coming from California, he was very big on EV vehicles. And you don't have power, you don't have a vehicle. And right now, if you would ask, if you talk to him today, he's anti-cell phone companies, because all the companies didn't have cell service, because they all share the same antennas. So he's very anti that. So he's big into satellite phones now and big into satellite internet. And he's getting rid of his EV vehicle because he couldn't charge it. So he couldn't move. So I mean, EV vehicles are great, but that should not be your sole vehicle, because I'm telling you, I don't see this being a one-off. I see stuff like this happening, maybe not frequently, but it will happen in the near future to other areas that are not used to natural disasters. And like I said, North Carolina, specifically your area, was really unprepared because it never happened. So
yeah,
right.
My one hang up with like HughesNet, I've had properties with HughesNet, and I have some experience with Starlink, isn't so much the cost, because it's not super. Starlink has a pretty high upfront cost. The monthly payment isn't horrible, but it's not super consistent with internet speed. Like HughesNet, it was horrible. Like you could barely stream anything. And Starlink, as long as you're on it at like 2:00 in the morning, it's like 200 meg download. But during the day when everybody else is using it, it's like 10.
No, but it's changed. It's changed. So if you look at, like I have Starlink in my Georgia property, and it's actually better than the internet that I have now here in Fort Lauderdale.
Really?
It's gotten so much better, because I agree with you. Like before Starlink, when we had HughesNet, man, you're right, man. You can't stream on it. It was very spotty. It was like the original satellite or direct TV. You get clouds and you can't see anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it was. But they've gotten much, much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, so in my property in Georgia, we have both. We have regular cable and we have Starlink. And my Starlink is actually better than my regular cable.
Oh, wow.
So I recommend to look at it again because it has truly gone better. Even HughesNet has gotten much better than it was when it originally came out. And I think it just has to do, there's a lot more satellites up in space now than ever before. So I think that's the reason they got much better. But so those are my two recommendations for the future. If you can, like I said, make sure you have VAs to help control your operations.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm definitely going to implement that one for sure.
Yeah, it's a big plus. So now let's shift gears to holiday travel, right? Especially for you guys out there, because now you guys are kind of going into your season. What approaches or what marketing techniques or what are you doing now to try to make up for some of the losses that you had in September and October? And what do you see coming up now for holiday travel?
I'm not going to lie. We have very few inquiries right now for anything other than displaced people. So, we've literally transitioned. Of our 56 properties, we have 10 that don't have anybody in it right now. And so we would take a short-term renter right now, but we're really focused on just getting displaced people and filling up these properties. So I don't think we're going to really have a holiday season this year, because the places are going to be booked for 2 or 3 months at a time.
Yeah. But which is good for you. And like I said, it's focusing on displaced people and focusing on, and I'm sure you're probably getting inquiries from workers because a lot of people went up there to work.
And
those people
all of our inquiries are coming from displaced people or agencies helping displaced people.
Yeah. So are you in terms of marketing, what marketing strategies are you doing specifically for that group?
So we have reached out, we've been working with a lot of local nonprofits that are helping local people. We're registered on FEMA and, all the national ones. There's another company called ALE that we've been working with to help displaced people. They're kind of like the middleman between the insurance company and the homeowner to help them. They'll pay out knowing that the insurance company is going to reimburse them, type of thing, I think is how it works. But they've been really helpful. And then, we've just put huge discounts on our properties that are going out to the OTAs.
Let's go back a little bit on some of these nonprofits and some of these companies that you're working with. Because I think that's a very, very good strategy, right? So for those that are listening and those that will listen to this in the future, walk us through that process. What did you do? Did you go on the internet and say, hey, how did you find these companies?
So I'm not going to lie. I'm not the one that personally did it. So one of my team members did that. She kind of did some research online and found them. So awesome. And she's the one that has been, filling out their online forms to get us on their list, type of thing,
Awesome. Yeah, that's okay. So I'll tell you, for us, because that's a that's a very good strategy to have when you're part of this, when you're in this position that Corey's in, right? I would first of all, get on all the emergency, like FEMA, get on their website, offer your properties up. There's going to be forms you have to fill out, but get on those lists. Also, in your local chamber of commerce, there's opportunities to go on there as well and look for nonprofits that and also your churches to look for them to team up with and say, hey, I have X company, we have these properties, and offer your properties for these displaced people or these companies. And then as it relates to companies, the big ones to look for is going to be any power company. I would reach out to their human resource department and then let them know, hey, we are a property management company. We have these properties that are available to your workers. Give them your information so they can reach out to you. Power companies are big. The next one is going to be landscaping and tree cutting companies. They're going to start, and if you haven't already noticed it, they're going to pop out of the woodwork. Roofing companies, all these, roofing, mode and restoration companies, they're going to start to pop out of the woodwork. I would be contacting all these companies and letting them know, hey, I have these properties that are empty, and we can house your workers while they stay there, and you can give them give them your rates, give them your contact information. If you follow that strategy alone, you will be booked 100% during the disasters, right? During these hurricanes or these natural disasters that happen, because they all going to need a place to stay, and there's not enough hotels. So,
yeah.
All right. So that's on holiday travel for you guys. Now, I can tell you for us, we looked at the numbers, and this year's holiday travel is going to be a very productive few months. Our inquiries are high, our bookings are high. We're currently 30% up, or our bookings are 30% higher for November and December than they were last year. So
nice.
Holiday travel for us is going to be good. And for you guys, like I said, if you focus on temporary workers and focus on displaced people, I think you're going to be more than fine with that. Now, have you had a chance to look? I know you've been super busy, but I want to talk about the Airbnb's winter release. Have you got a chance to see those releases they put out?
I haven't. No. I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Let me tell you two big ones, and I want to get your thoughts on it and tell me what you think about them. Right. The first one is their co-hosting program. So what Airbnb is doing, and I'll explain my opinion as to why they're doing it. But Airbnb put out a survey to all their short-term rental operators. I don't know if you actually filled that out. I know I did. But as a result of that survey, they discovered that a lot of people that responded said that they were willing to host more or willing to expand their portfolio if they had help. Now, if you're not aware, or if those watching are not aware, more than 87% of Airbnb operators are mom and pops, meaning they're self-managed, or they have one or two properties, but they're handling all their operations themselves, right? So Airbnb took that on and figured, hey, we can team up these operators that want to expand or want to, if they're only hosting for a couple of months, they want to host longer, if they can team those people up with an experienced host. So that's program number one that I want to discuss. Now, full transparency, I signed up for that because for me, it's more opportunities to meet more owners of properties and help manage those properties, and just an extra income, right, for me. Now, on the flip side, one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of it, and like I've already mentioned, I'm not really a big fan of Airbnb altogether, because there's a lot of stuff they do that's not good for the actual host. It's more for the guests. But Airbnb is doing this because they want you to be more dependent on their platform. So and I think that's, as an operator, I think that's a huge mistake. You should not be dependent on one single platform. You should be, you should diverse and be on multiple platforms. More importantly, you should be focusing on having more direct bookings. So what's your thought of this. I mean, I know you don't have all the details on it, but basically what Airbnb is trying to do is get into the management business using operators.
I did hear about the co-hosting thing, so I'm semi-familiar with that. I mean, I think it's a good way for us to get in front of owners. Like, so I'm not opposed to it, but like you said, I'm not a huge fan of Airbnb either. Like, I think most of my headaches come from Airbnb and just dealing with their customer service and how they almost always side with the guest, no matter what the situation. So I do think they're definitely trying to take over the market, and they feel like by doing this co-hosting thing that you're going to be stuck with them. So
Correct.
I think, I'm with you. I think we're in the process of trying to transition to more direct bookings with direct marketing and all that kind of stuff too, just to get away from all the OTAs, not just Airbnb.
And that's I'm here to tell you that that's the way to go, because that's the future. Another thing on Airbnb before I move on to their second program, that the second program, I think it's really much more. I think it's going to affect us even more, and I'll touch on it in a second. But so the other big thing that Airbnb is doing, and they're taking. So I'll talk about my business because it relates to what I'm to this aspect, right? You're seeing more and more companies trying to be more vertical. What I mean by vertical is the following. So Uber, and I don't know if you know this yet, Corey, but Uber is trying to buy out Expedia. In fact, they put a bid for Expedia. And for those that are not familiar, Expedia also owns Vrbo. Expedia is a travel platform for bookings, for car rentals, hotels, and short-term rentals, right? So Uber is trying to get into that because they want to be vertical. They want, and the analogy I like to use, they're Uber and Airbnb, because Airbnb is also trying to do the same. They're trying to be the Amazons of travel, right? And that's the analogy I like to use, because Amazon, if you remember, only sold books in the beginning. And now they're the number one retail store in the world. They sell everything. They're very vertical, right?
Yeah.
And Uber's trying to do it now by buying Expedia, because if they buy Expedia, you can just go to Uber now, get a car rental, or get your Uber, get your flights, get your hotels, everything in one spot. Airbnb got wind of that, and they're doing the same. They're trying to go vertical, and they're trying for you to go to the platform and book your flight, book your short-term rental, book your experience, because they had already had the experience all in one platform, right? So now, like I said, I'll use my company as an example. My core business is the management of short-term rentals, right? That's my core. But I have a lot of verticals. Within that core, I have the landscaping company, the pool company, the cleaning company, the travel agency, all in one spot, so I can give that guest or that potential guest a better experience by controlling the whole process. And that's where Uber and that's where Airbnb are trying to go. They understand that if they control the entire process, they can give that customer a better experience. And in this business, that's what it's all about. We want to make sure that every guest has a phenomenal experience so they can return to us, right? So saying all that, and that they're trying to become Airbnb's now is trying to become the Amazon of the travel industry. Here's the next program that they roll out that I think I don't, jury's going to be out, but I personally don't think it's going to help us, the short-term rental operator. So here's what it is. They changed their algorithm on how people view properties. So if you can imagine a listing being like a website or a Instagram page or a Facebook page, right? Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, when you go on their platform, they already know who you are. They know your likes, your dislikes. So they advertise what they believe they're going to be able to sell to you. Airbnb is doing the exact same thing. So now, as a user of the platform, if I go to Airbnb, Airbnb is only going to show me what they think I'm going to like. So here's why that's important for operators. But more importantly, it's more important for people like you and I, Corey, because we are managing other people's properties. So, and I don't know if this is the case with you. And let me ask you this question. Have you ever had an owner call you and say, hey, Corey, I can't find my listing on Airbnb?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So now they're definitely not going to find it on Airbnb. And the reason being is because the algorithm is going to know that they're not going to book that property. Because what ends up happening, and this is, I'm going to speak on my experience. I get owners all the time looking to see where how their property looks on Airbnb. So they'll go onto their account, they'll look for their property, they'll find it, they'll click on it, but they never book it. Well, that hurts the conversion rate. Yeah. So that tells Airbnb, don't ever show this property to this person, because this person looked at it 3 or 4 times and never booked it. Yeah. So it's going to take it completely off their search pattern, because now the search pattern is completely personalized. So as before, we used to focus a lot in our listings and making sure that we have the correct SEO to show up on that first page. Now that's useless. It's irrelevant. It's not going to matter because it doesn't. All it matters is who's actually doing the searches.
Yeah, so, I heard about Airbnb, like they're moving the pictures around to customize them, but I didn't hear about the rest of the algorithm. So I think that's going to mess everybody up. Yeah, our tried and true ways of keeping us on the first page is going to be worthless. Yeah,
it's worthless. So, and I saw it coming because I did a video on this as well. Back in the day, we used to, and I'm sure you remember this in the early days, we used to title our properties. We used to try to figure out a clever name to put it on there, because back in the day, when you did a search, they showed the name of the property. They don't do that anymore. They stopped doing that a while ago. So now you don't even see the name of the property. So it's irrelevant naming it, because it doesn't affect it at all, because you can't even see it. When they did that, it's when I realized, wait a second, something's up, because that's one of the ways that you would show up on the first page or second page, not only because the customers remembers the name, but it was also part of the SEO process, the same way of making sure that you write descriptions for pictures, so that the algorithm could pick up what it is. And if you have a jacuzzi, don't just put the picture of the jacuzzi right in the description. It's a jacuzzi. It sits so many people, because that's part of that search pattern. You still want to do that with the pictures, and now you really want to do that even more, because a guest it's going to be automatic. If a guest gets on there, the algorithm's going to know what that guest has booked in the past. So they're going to show them properties that are similar to that. This is why I've been preaching, and I think it's hugely important for short-term rental operators to make sure that you start establishing that email list with your past customers, targeting those past customers, because you can do what Airbnb is doing. They know the customer, they know what they like, they know what they want, and they're going to show that to that person. Very important. So, sure. And for those that are watching, related to this, now it's a good time to sit down with your owners and explain to them what the new algorithm is for Airbnb. Because I'm telling you, they're going to start calling you. I can't see my listing. I can't find it. I told my friend to look, and she can't find it either.
Yeah, and It drives me crazy because I'm like, I'm like, why are you even looking for it on Airbnb? Just go to your portal if you want to see the calendar or whatnot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah. And now that they're doing that with the algorithm, you're right. They'll never see it now because they've clicked on it so many times and not booked it that Airbnb is going to basically delete it from their feed completely.
Correct. And I knew in the past because, they look at the analytics, right? They look at click rate or impressions, click rate, and conversion. And that's how they rate properties to put them on the first or second page. And I used to tell owners, don't do that because you're hurting our click rate. But now, at least back then, they were still able to find the property. Now they're not going to be able to find it. They're going to tell you, what's going on? Why is my property not there? But it's something that we should all be aware of because that's a big change on how people search for properties. And it's great for the consumer. And again, this is one of the reasons, I'll repeat myself again. Airbnb is going to, and you mentioned it as well, they are now more, their priority is the guest. So they're going to do everything they can because that's the main customer is the guest because they have plenty of properties to advertise on. Now they're trying to fill the properties. The other thing, I don't know if you are aware, this is how important the guest is to them and how unimportant the host is. I think either the spring or this summer, they purged and got rid of a lot of properties on Airbnb. They were performing, below. I forget the number, but if you had like a 4.1 or less rating, they just got rid of you. I don't know if you're aware of that, Corey.
Luckily I don't have any properties that have that low of rating, but I didn't see that. No, they just kicked them off the platform completely.
Kicked them off the platform. Yeah, kicked them off the platform. So again, more evidence, and this is why I tell people you really, really, really need to not be dependent on Airbnb because they're not in. If you are an operator, they're really not in your best interest anymore. They're in the interest of
for a while.
Yeah, it's been for a while, right? And you know that. It's all about the guests. This is why listen, I'm okay with that because I know it, right? I'm okay them doing that because they're in business to make money. I'm in business to make money. But in order for me to maximize my revenue, I need to understand what the rules are. I need to, what's the playing field like? And I learned that being dependent on OTAs is the wrong way to go. And I learned that during COVID. It was definitely the wrong way to go. So in order to be viable, in order to stay on top of my game and be in this business for the long run, I need to be self-sufficient. I need to depend on me and my marketing team, not anyone else. But, I still give Airbnb credit in the sense that they created, they really put us on the map. Because before that, I mentioned before, I was here before Airbnb. It was really like short stays were non-existent. We used to be a seasonal management company. We used to cater to snowbirds that came down, so they did create a bigger industry. But you guys, everyone watching, you got to understand that you need to take care of you, right? You need don't focus on Airbnb because they have their own agenda. And some of the policies that they're creating, like the winter release, for the most part, is not going to be favorable to the host. And I saw that in last winter release when they started creating categories. When I saw that category, I'm like, oh my God, that's hurting the average short-term rental operator because categories, and they're big on these specialty short-term rentals like tree houses, like
unique stays.
Yeah, unique stays. That was their focus last year, and it continues to be their focus in the future. Why? Because there's so many 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes out there. There's so many of them. you know?
Yeah. I think the thing that drives me crazy about Uber and Airbnb or all of them is their whole business model is based off of using other people's properties, you know?
Right.
So you think while I realize that the guest is the one paying the money, but without the homes, there would be no money to pay for. So why do they pander to the guest more than the host when they don't own a single property to host a guest in, you know?
But here's why. Here's why. Because in the very beginning, it was the opposite. In the very beginning, they really catered to the host. But today, there's just so many. They could, like I said, they just purged worldwide. I forget the exact number, but it was a lot. They purged like over 10,000 properties on Airbnb, right? Worldwide. They took them off the system because they don't need them because they have so many. There's so many, right? Their focus now is to fill the properties that they currently have. And that's why they're being more selective. And that's why they cater to the guests more than ever before. And I get that part. Listen, I get it. You know, I have, early on, I think I had this discussion with you, man. I was obsessed to have 100 properties under management. Like that was my obsession. Like I wanted that magic number of 100, right? I got to it and then realized I failed my core customer, the guest. So because I had 100 properties, but my occupancy rate as a result of it dropped, right? And I realized sometimes it's better to have 50 properties that are occupied 80% of the time than having 100 properties occupied 30% of the time. So, you know, I get what Uber is doing. I get what Airbnb is doing. I mean, I fully understand it, but I also fully understand that they're doing it because that's their best interest, not my best interest. And I know that. I'm okay with it. I'm on the platform as a result of that. But I need to focus the same way they're focusing on the guest. I need to focus on the guest. And I know that my problem children usually come from Airbnb. So I need to make sure that and knowing that, and booking exactly. So let me just ask you a few more questions because I kept you on the phone for a very long time. I mean, on this podcast for a very long time. What so let's look in the future, right? Once this whole process, the recovery process comes back, you know, tell me what do you think or what do you feel is the future going into 2025? Like how do you see the industry changing, or do you see it changing? Do you see it getting better? Do you see that it's going to slow down? What's your prediction?
My prediction is it's going to get better, you know, especially for this area. All the people that wanted to come here this fall, I think by next spring, they're all going to be coming back in much higher numbers, you know, to visit the area and to see the destruction, you know, because by then everything will be up and running again, you know, so they could just see what's left of it. But I think in the long run, I think that travel is going to keep going up. You know, I think if we were to go into a recession, which, you know, depending on what news station you listen to, you know, everybody's saying that it's a possibility. I don't think it's going to be a travel one. I think people are going to, you know, stop buying consumables, but still have the experiences. So they're still going to travel and go to places and have the experiences. They're just going to cut back on, you know, buying the nice pair of shoes or the expensive purse or, you know, something like that. At least that's my thought. Like from everything that I've been looking at, that's kind of where I think it's going to be.
Yeah, no, I 1000% agree. In fact, just looking at the analytics, looking at data, looking at what so I spend a lot of time looking and following the data and statistics from TSA because I want to know how the air industry is doing, right? And just looking at that, you're looking at airlines. Airlines post-COVID reduced a lot of flights routes. Because they were losing a lot of money. People weren't flying because of COVID. But every year since post-COVID, airlines are struggling to keep up with air travel. And the amount of people going through the major hubs in the U.S. have exceeded post-COVID travel data and numbers, right? In fact, it's become so bad for the airlines, and that this is why you see a lot of delays, cancellations from airlines. That TSA, and I'm not sure if you know this, but TSA recently, this just happened, I think a month ago, implemented new rules for the airlines. So if you're a traveler and your flight gets delayed, and I think it's more than 3 hours, or it gets canceled, the airline has to automatically refund you. In the past, they would give you an excuse, whatever, and they wouldn't refund you. They'll try to, just put you on another flight. That's gone, right? TSA now says, no, you can't do that. If you're delayed or you cancel the flight, you have to give that traveler the option of a full refund so they can book someplace else. And that's a direct result of the numbers going up and the amounts of complaints that people have, because currently right now, the airlines aren't keeping up with travel. So I agree with you. And I think 2025, and I already mentioned that we already know that November, December numbers are greater than they were last year in terms of the amount of travel. In fact, my own numbers, for example, let me look here real quick. For November, we're 33% up from last November. And December, we're going to be 47% up in terms of revenue and occupancy than we were last December. So wow. I firmly believe that the travel industry is like you said, there's going to be more and more people looking to do that. And I'll give you another interesting story. I just had a phone call she was an old client of mine. She had a property. We were managing it as a short-term rental. She ended up selling that property and bought another property. She wanted to upgrade, so she sold the home she was living in and the one we were managing, and then bought this big mansion in Fort Lauderdale. And now she's coming up of age. She wants to retire, but she wants to travel. So we're going to convert her new property into short-term rental. But having the discussion with her really made me realize, and again, I travel all the time, so I experience this with people all over the world. She is going to be what the norm is, right? She wants to rent out her place because she wants to experience life elsewhere. So she's going to be, her plan is beginning of the year is spending a couple of months in Europe, actually 6 months in Europe and 6 months in South America, and then come back to the US. But she's going to do this a couple of months in a different part of different country. But there's a lot of people like that. In fact, in my travel agency, I can't tell you how many clients we have that are telling me the same thing. Yeah, can you find me a property in Spain? I want to spend 3 months in Spain. I want to spend 3 months in Italy. Tons, right? Because I firmly believe that people are realizing that, number one, the world is small, right? We can now go anywhere at any time and very inexpensive. I don't want any judgment, people, but when I travel to Europe or I travel anywhere that's 6 or 7 hours longer, I have to fly business class. But the difference is today, I can fly business class for the same price I would have flown economy a couple of years back. It's that cheap, right? The only caveat is that you have to be flexible with your dates and maybe your destination. Like I always tell people, if you're going to Europe, oftentimes just fly into Madrid, because Madrid is probably the flights from the US to the Madrid is usually the cheapest than any other part of Western Europe. And then once you're in Madrid, you can hop on a train or get a domestic flight for less than 50 euros. So it's a great way to travel cheaply. But anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent, but you're going to see more and more people doing that. So I personally believe that for our industry, the future definitely looks bright. In addition to that, and we're seeing this with the numbers, right? With Airbnb purging some of these not well-performing properties, a lot of short-term rental operators are actually leaving the game because they got into it anybody that got into it 2 years or less are struggling because they probably bought these properties at numbers that they can't sustain because they were still looking at the post, pandemic numbers that were insane, that we're not going to see again. So the industry has normalized, right? It's stable now. So we're getting stable numbers, and we're getting rid of these, what I refer to as these non-professionals that only jumped on the bandwagon because there was money to be made on a lot of it. Now it's not as rich as it was before. You can still do very well in the industry, but we're getting rid of those people that we need to get rid of, that are really not professionals, that are really not doing this as a profession. So it leaves you and I and operators like us with what I refer to as a stable market. And I think we're going to be. Any closing thoughts there?
No, I 100% agree. I think, people who jumped on the bandwagon are going to either turn their property into a long-term rental or sell it, which is good for us. I wholeheartedly believe that,
All right, brother. This was fun.
Absolutely.
Number one, I want to thank you for coming on again and sharing your story. Hey. Number two, I want to thank God for protecting you guys. I firmly believe that, God had a hand in your, not only your safety, but in the fact that you guys personally, your team personally didn't sustain any serious damage. Super excited. Those that are watching, thank you for watching. You guys are the best. Don't forget to subscribe. Follow me on Instagram. I'm going to have Corey's information in the bottom. Love you guys. See you in the next one.
Thanks again. Corey, I appreciate it.
No problem, buddy. Hang on.